Tonight, ministers consider delaying the lifting of England's lockdown restrictions by up to 4 weeks as new cases rise. More than half the UK's adult population is now fully vaccinated, but public health officials are urging ministers to agree a delay amid a rise in the highly infectious Delta variant. New cases rose above 8,000 today for the first time since the end of February. Also tonight, the Queen hosts world leaders at a reception in Cornwall as the G7 summit gets underway. During talks today, the focus was on the pandemic, as Boris Johnson said errors over the past 18 months mustn't be repeated.
I actually think this is a meeting that genuinely needs to happen, because we need to make sure that we learn the lessons from the pandemic.
A 24-year-old neo-Nazi who created 2 banned right-wing terror groups has been convicted of 12 terrorism offences.
Coming up in the sports on the BBC News Channel, we'll bring
Good evening. It's understood that ministers are now considering delaying the final lifting of coronavirus restrictions in England by up to 4 weeks. Stage 4 of the roadmap out of lockdown was due to take place in 10 days' time on June the 21st, but there are growing concerns about the spread of the new Delta variant and the rise in new cases. It's thought a delay of a few weeks would allow for the vaccination programme to take greater effect. The Prime Minister will announce his final decision on Monday. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
Tonight there's increasing speculation that the lifting of restrictions in England will be delayed beyond June the 21st. Senior health officials like Dr Jenny Harries visiting Bolton today will brief ministers on the spread of the Delta variant, first identified in India, as final decisions are made.
One of the really critical points is to see what the effectiveness of the vaccine has been in preventing hospitalisation, serious illness and deaths. And that piece of work is literally still ongoing because, gladly, we haven't had too many cases so far.
The latest figures on the Delta variant show there'd been more than 42,000 cases in the UK by June the 9th, up sharply on the previous week. In England, there'd been 223 hospital admissions by June the 7th, up from 89 a week before. In the latest figures, most were unvaccinated, with only 20 having had both doses.
We know now conclusively that it is about 60% more transmissible, which is obviously a worry. And we also know that if you are sick with the Delta variant, you're more likely to end up in hospital.
The Doctors' Union, the British Medical Association and public health leaders have called for a delay in the lifting of restrictions in England. They say the vaccination programme has been a great success, but more time's needed to administer second doses, and case numbers are rising rapidly. The Office for National Statistics survey of community infections suggests in England 1 in 560 people had the virus last week. That's around 97,000, up from about 85,500 people the previous week. In Wales, it was 1 in 1,300. In Scotland, 1 in 540. And in Northern Ireland, 1 in 700 people had the virus. In all three, the ONS said the trend was uncertain. Any thought of delays to the roadmap is bad news for wedding venues like this one in Warwickshire. They're expecting all limits on the number of guests to be lifted on June the 21st. If that doesn't happen, they say, it'll be a huge blow.
This is probably one of the worst things to have to go through, and the waiting has been really quite awful, to be honest. Not only for us as a venue, but for the couples. It's a special day for them.
And there are mixed views among people we spoke to in Watford.
They've done this since the start of lockdown. They tell you a day and then they change it to another one. And that is really annoying because they should be more prepared.
You just have to sit and wait, hold tight and get ready for when everything comes back.
For the public, it's sitting and waiting over the weekend, while officials and ministers consider the final shape of how restrictions might look even after June the 21st, with an announcement due on Monday. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Well, the number of new coronavirus cases across the UK has risen above 8,000 for the first time since the end of February. There were 8,125 new cases recorded in the past 24 hours. That's up almost 60% in the past week. Deaths remain low, though, with 17 recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, over 6,500 new cases have been recorded per day in the last week. And hospitalisations are beginning to rise slowly, with more than 1,000 people in hospital. More than 200,000 people received their first vaccine in the latest 24-hour period. So over 41 million people now have had one jab. That's 78% of UK adults. And more than 300,000 have had their second dose, meaning just over 29 million have had both jabs. That's more than 55% of UK adults now fully vaccinated. Well, our political correspondent Jessica Barker is in Westminster. Millions of adults fully vaccinated, but how likely is it that the lifting of these restrictions will now be delayed in England?
Well, there has, of course, been lots of speculation in recent days that there could be a delay to what's sometimes known as Freedom Day, June the 21st, when it was hoped that all legal restrictions on social contact would be lifted. There'd be further easements for businesses and large events as well. But ministers were always clear they could delay things if the right conditions weren't, in their view, met. And there is concern about the Delta variant. There's concern too about a rise in case rates. So sources tonight saying that a 4-week delay, or up to a 4-week delay, is being considered. Whether there could be some special relaxations around events like weddings, well, I'm told various options are being looked at. But the argument in government is that a delay could allow for the vaccination programme to keep taking greater effect, allow for some breathing space. Downing Street sources tonight, they really insistent no final decisions have yet been made. The data is still being looked at. We expect an announcement on Monday. So, of course, for Boris Johnson, he's got his big G7 summit down in Cornwall this weekend, but a big decision when he gets back to Downing Street as well.
Jessica, thank you. And Hugh Pym is here. Tell us more about the data that they will be looking at.
Well, Sophie, it's been becoming clear throughout the day that there was no minister going out there repeating the line that it's data, not dates, and it would all be announced on June the 14th, Monday. By contrast, we had Nadeem Zahawi, the vaccines minister, saying we had to be really careful. And in his words, we didn't want to squander the progress already made. Now, talking to officials in Whitehall tonight, it does seem that concern has been growing in the light of this PHE, Public Health England data on the Delta variant, first identified in India. The really quite sharp increase in the number of cases over a week, the fact that it is 60% more transmissible, that it spreads that much more rapidly than the existing Kent variant, and the number of hospital admissions having gone up, although still from quite a low base. And the concern is here that you need people to be double jabbed. You need the maximum protection available from those 2 doses. And still, 45% of the population have not had both those doses. Therefore, the argument is you need to carry on rolling out that programme for another 3 or 4 weeks. And you've now got health leaders at the British Medical Association and public health leaders from local authorities also calling for delays. So the case has been mounting throughout today. It's now up to ministers to decide how exactly it's going to play out on June the 21st.
Our medical editor, Hugh Pym, thank you. Boris Johnson has welcomed world leaders to Cornwall at the start of their first face-to-face talks for almost 2 years. The Prime Minister urged the G7 group of nations to learn from the mistakes of the pandemic. He predicted that the leading economies would bounce back from the COVID crisis, but stressed the importance of ensuring the recovery helped all parts of society. This evening, the Queen and other members of the royal family were joined by the world leaders at a reception in Cornwall. Here's our political editor, Laura Kuensberg.
Getting to this remote part of the country isn't easy. They've come from 5 continents to Cornwall. But the winding last mile of the journeys of the most powerful leaders in the world ended down on the beach. Coronavirus kept prime ministers, presidents and millions of us apart. But now the leaders of the most powerful democracies in the world are lining up together. Some of them appear that they can't even get quite close enough. The Prime Minister wants a joint huge vow for 1 billion vaccines so the world can gather again too. Official hellos done, time for vital talks behind closed doors.
Thank you all very much for coming. It is genuinely wonderful to see everybody in person. We're building back better together and building back greener and building back fairer and building back more equal. And how shall I, in a more gender neutral and perhaps a more feminine way. How about that?
a reference to getting more girls into classrooms in developing countries.
Make the world a better place.
That's the G7 theory, at least. The First Lady and the Duchess of Cambridge descended on the 4- and 5-year-olds of Connor Downs Academy in Hale today. Unusually, the royal family, part of this week's big political push. And Downing Street reckons they've sailed over the first big hurdle, rebooting the so-called special relationship between the United States and the UK, with a new name for a new chapter too.
It's a relationship, you call it the deep and meaningful relationship, you call it whatever you want, the indestructible relationship. It's a relationship that has endured for a very long time and has been an important part of peace and prosperity, both in Europe and around the world.
I mean, when it comes to vaccine, you're making a huge progress, about 100 million, but in the next few weeks, the UK is only sending 5 million. You could already have sent vaccines to developing countries. That hasn't happened. Isn't there a danger that you're talking big, you're making big promises, but actually then you deliver something else?
Great respect, Laura. I think that the people of this country should be very proud that of the 1.5 billion doses that are being distributed around the world to the poorest and neediest in the world, 1 in 3 come from the Oxford AstraZeneca deal that the UK did. Yes, we're putting in 5 million doses by September, but we'll do 100 million before 12 months is out. That's a huge number of extra doses.
That's one of the objections from outside. There are a few small but noisy bands of protesters who've made it to the fringes of the summit. And trouble looms on a different front too. The UK is not at the EU table anymore, but the others still huddle together, with intense tension over how Brexit's affected Northern Ireland, plotting perhaps how to take on Boris Johnson on that tomorrow. That's a sidebar to the main business though, a commitment to big democracies working together.
Das Bekenntnis zum Multilateralismus.
The multilateralism, the German Chancellor says, that's gone missing in recent years. If global cooperation really is on the way back, look who arrived to witness it. The monarchy in full force, 3 generations of glad handing. And Prince Charles tonight, even suggesting what the politicians themselves should do. The next king told them if they cooperate on COVID, they should cooperate on the climate too.
The fight against this terrible pandemic provides, if ever one was needed, a crystal clear example of the scale and sheer speed at which the global community can tackle crises when we combine political will with business ingenuity and public mobilization. Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing it for the pandemic. So, if you don't mind me saying so, we must also do it for the planet.
After tonight's greenery at the Eden Project, leaders will talk about the environment in the next few days. But the centre of the world stage was filled by the host of honour, who's walked it for longer than the rest of them. Seats out, handbag down, the Queen's quip about how fun this really is.
How's that?
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes, definitely. We have been enjoying ourselves in spite of appearances.
Appearances are a vital part of all of this. The other leaders crowding in to be close to her. But agreed action in the next 48 hours is what matters and what will be left behind. And Sophie, the world's leaders of the biggest democracies have had, if you like, the full beam of the glare of the British establishment shone in their faces tonight. 3 generations of the royal family coming to what is normally a political gathering. That's something unusual and something that is worth remarking on. And I think from Downing Street's point of view, well, the opening salvos in this summit have gone pretty well, particularly with the budding friendship between the Prime Minister and President Joe Biden. What the Prime Minister now wants to be known as the indestructible relationship. But tomorrow there could be some trickier conversations. There'll be some one-to-ones with European leaders. We all know the tensions over how Brexit is affecting Northern Ireland in particular. And I think for the next few days until the end of this weekend, for sure,
Questions will remain over how the Prime Minister and his counterparts here are really going to keep the big promises that they've made, particularly today's vows on vaccines.
Laura Kunsberg, thank you. World leaders are pledging to donate 1 billion COVID vaccines to poorer countries that are struggling to vaccinate their populations. Our science editor David Shukman looks at whether today's pledge from G7 leaders will be enough.
Coronavirus vaccines are starting to reach the remotest corners of the world. This team has come to a village in Kenya. But the problem isn't so much giving out doses, but getting hold of them in the first place. To have any chance of getting even a fraction of each country immunised by the autumn.
Africa needs an extra 225 million doses. This will really require a massive effort, as our early projections indicate that without a significant boost in the availability of vaccines, only 7 African countries will achieve this goal.
So far around the world, about 2 billion doses have been given and some 480 million people are now fully vaccinated. But that's still only 6.2% of the global population. And some regions have done far better than others. Sub-Saharan Africa has received only 1% of all vaccine doses, and 18 African countries have either totally run out, like Morocco and Rwanda, or are due to run out in the next few weeks, including Kenya and Ghana.
So Africa is really seems to be the last continent that will be vaccinated. It will be mid to end of next year by our calculations, but currently there simply aren't enough doses available for Africa. They haven't procured enough doses, and the real problem is that Africa is not producing any doses. They don't have any domestic production apart from a little bit in South Africa.
So what needs to happen? Well, we've had a flurry of offers from the G7, the US promising 500 million doses, the UK 100 million, the EU the same, and Japan 30 million. But the medical charity, the Wellcome Trust, says the rich nations should be giving 1 billion doses this year, and also filling a gap in the funding of $18 billion for testing and for treatments in the poorest countries. And as a reminder of the urgency of all this, Uganda is the latest country to go back into lockdown, with schools closing and children sent home as cases have suddenly shot up again. There is a clear route out of the pandemic, but as things stand, it will take time. David Shukman, BBC News.
A 24-year-old neo-Nazi from Bath who created 2 banned right-wing terror groups has been convicted of 12 terrorism offences. Andrew Dimick was also found guilty of 3 hate crimes by a jury at the Old Bailey. The court heard how he aimed to start a race war through websites and social media. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford reports.
Privately educated in Bath, Andrew Dimick is the son of a university professor, but he founded not 1 but 2 neo-Nazi terrorist groups. Both had to be banned as a threat to national security.
I think his prosecution and his conviction and sentencing is a key step in protecting the UK.
On the System Resistance Network website, he called for Jewish people to be exterminated. He's seen here in the white shirt giving the Nazi salute. He called for zero tolerance to non-whites and described same-sex relationships as a disease. The other group he founded, Sonnenkrieg Division, produced deliberately provocative propaganda, including a poster calling for the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, to be shot as a race traitor, which the BBC is not showing. The group is now banned in Australia as well as the UK. Those he recruited were usually younger, like schoolboy Oskar Dunn Kozorowski, who's one of 7 people linked to Dimick who have been jailed. On a gaming chat server which BBC News infiltrated for the exclusive report that first exposed him, Dimick suggested all police officers should be killed. In court here at the Old Bailey, the same man who'd called for the death of all police officers tried to blame everyone else for his predicament. He claimed that he was the victim of an elaborate setup by both the police and a teenage girl. Dimick was first arrested trying to travel to America to train with members of this group, Atomwaffen Division, showing his international terrorist connections. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, at the Old Bailey.
Euro 2020 is finally underway, delayed by a whole year because of the pandemic. It kicked off in Rome as Italy took on Turkey, with the first victory going to the home side as Italy won 3-0. 24 countries will compete in 11 cities across Europe. Thousands of fans will be admitted to every game. Over the next few days, Wales, England and Scotland will all be in action too. Our sports editor Dan Roan is at Wembley for us tonight. Dan.
Sophie, it's hard to believe, isn't it, that when this unprecedented pan-European competition was first envisaged several years ago, the biggest concern was the cost to fans of travelling around the continent and a lack of identity. But since then, of course, the pandemic is what's caused organisers anxiety. But despite all the challenges, tonight in Rome, Euro 2020 got off to a flying start. Last year, Italy was the European epicentre of COVID, suffering worst when the virus first emerged here. But now Rome would belatedly play host to the start of the biggest sports event since the pandemic began. The 16,000 fans allowed inside the Olympic Stadium, a potent symbol of hope.
Seeing what happened to this country was one of the first to get hit, and now being able to come here and celebrate with my people and everybody else who's enjoying the sport, it's really a dream come true.
And while there were some novel touches, it was the traditional drive of a clearly inspired Italy that was about to steal the show.
Turkey now in trouble.
3 second-half goals against Turkey, ensuring the most emphatic of starts to their campaign. This Italy's biggest win in the competition.
There you go, deal with that, 3-0.
Sweltering conditions forecast here at Wembley meanwhile, where final preparations are underway ahead of England's opening match against Croatia here on Sunday in what's effectively a home tournament for one of the favourites.
We have this young group, we're hungry to do well and to make the nation proud, so going into every game we're going to be ready and trying to perform to the best of our ability.
And there's the taking of the knee.
There's been fears of a repeat of the booing that's marred recent England games, but today Downing Street said the Prime Minister wanted fans to be respectful when players take a knee. Scotland revealing they'll join England in the anti-discrimination gesture when the old rivals meet at Wembley next week, having initially said they would stand in protest against racism.
We're trying to send a message out there to society. We have to do better. Discrimination in any way, shape or form is unacceptable. And that should be the key message, not whether we stand against racism or whether we take the knee.
Got off to a memorable start. Well, Wembley will be about a quarter full on Sunday for England's opener against Croatia here, around 22,500 fans, and there's still hope that it could be even fuller come the knockout stages, around 50% capacity, perhaps if everything goes to plan. England's fans no doubt hoping that this tournament revives memories of Euro 96 when their team went all the way to the last four on home soil. It hasn't been such an easy journey for Wales, of course, who, as Howell Griffith now reports from Baku, have had to journey far.
A turning point in Welsh sporting history.
What a goal from Hal Robson-Connors!
When the team of 2016 made it all the way to the semi-finals of the Euros, they lived out a football fantasy. First-timers at the tournament, the man who led them there still can't believe what they achieved.
I think we'd all say it was the best summer of our career, if not one of the best summers of our lives. It was a fluke, let's be honest. Like, we got to the semi-final. We didn't think we would. No one else thought we would. We kind of can't compare it, and it's unfair on these lads that have done so well to get where they've got.
Wales start this tournament on the eastern extremity of Europe here in Azerbaijan. 8 of the players who featured 5 years ago are in the squad, and that includes their game changer, Gareth Bale. This time he'll captain the team. Can he inspire them once again?
It's one of those things you can dream of when you're a kid, leading your country out into a major tournament. Yeah, what can I say? It's probably one of the biggest accomplishments I'm going to have. Everyone knows what happened in 2016, but yeah, this is a new task, this is a new challenge. We know it's going to be difficult. Yeah, to reach another semi-final would be incredible, but we really do have to take it one game at a time. We know the nation is behind us. They were last time, they always are.
Last time Wales thrived without being weighed down by expectation. This time the approach is equally relaxed. COVID restrictions mean the players spend every hour together in a bubble. They also mean very few fans have made the 3,000-mile journey to Baku after being told by the Welsh government not to travel.
12 years I haven't missed a game. I wasn't going to start because someone said, please don't.
It's not illegal. I've done everything the government has asked of me over the last 18 months. I've stayed at home. I've had the vaccinations. I've done the tests. I feel quite right to come here.
Tomorrow's first game against Switzerland will show how Wales measure up. Turkey and Italy will follow as the team of 2021 look to make their own memories. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Baku.
Cricket now, and England have endured a frustrating time in the field on the second day of the second and final test against New Zealand at Edgbaston. After a promising morning which saw them past 300, their opponents finished the day on 229 for 3, just 74 runs behind. Here's Joe Wilson.
Cricket is built on facts and figures, so most test matches for England, him. James Anderson, record breaker at Edgbaston, charging in at New Zealand's captain and... oh well, I dealt with that one, smiled Tom Latham.
Of course the match here isn't simply New Zealand against mature Anderson. I mean, there's Stuart Broad.
He bowled and Latham was beaten. LBW, New Zealand 1 down, but England had to watch lots of shots from other batsmen. That's Devon Conway. There's one of Will Young's greatest hits. In comes Anderson again, and there goes the ball. New Zealand moving towards England's first innings score of 303. It was becoming one of those afternoons. Still, social proximity was enough of a novelty in the stands. Remember, this is a test event. How on earth would England dismiss Devon Conway? Well, there on the west coast of the outfield, a catcher. Oh, what have I done? He made 80. As Will Young batted past 50, England could recall dropping him when he'd scored just 7. Well, don't look back. The final act of the day was part-time bowler Dan Lawrence dismissing Young for 82. Well, never stop believing. Joe Wilson, BBC News, Edgbaston.
And in the last few minutes at the French Open tennis, Rafa Nadal has been knocked out, only the third ever time he's lost at the tournament. Now, in the last few minutes, this year's Queen's birthday honours have been announced, celebrating the achievements and service of people across the UK. The England footballer Raheem Sterling receives an MBE for his work to promote racial equality in sport. Strictly Come Dancing judge Arlene Phillips is made a dame, as is the Great British Bake Off's Prue Leith. Many have been honoured for their work delivering the coronavirus vaccines that have saved thousands of lives, including members of the Oxford University AstraZeneca vaccine team. This report by our health correspondent Anna Collinson does contain some flashing images.
Spring 2020, a deadly new virus was at large. About half of the world's population facing lockdown. Globally, tens of thousands of people had already died from coronavirus. And scientists in Oxford were working around the clock to create a life-saving vaccine, unsure if it would ever become a reality. But in January, one of the members of the Oxford AstraZeneca team became one of the first to receive the jab. He's received a knighthood.
I'm obviously delighted to receive an honour, but I am just one cog in the most enormous machine that is involved in making a vaccine, testing it, developing it.
This time last year, the UK's vaccines task force was sifting through hundreds of possible jabs, urgently trying to identify and secure supplies of the most promising ones. Those tough decisions paid off, with 4 vaccines now approved by the UK regulator. The task force leader has been made a dame.
Seeing then the incredibly slick rollout of the vaccine across all parts of the UK has been just fantastic. And what's been really important is to see quite how effective those vaccines have been in the real world, actually preventing deaths.
No vaccine is risk-free, but to ensure they're safe and effective, they must undergo clinical trials. As well as looking after her young children, Divya Charamanek played a key role in speeding up this process. She's received an OBE for her work, which also involved setting up a vaccine research registry, which recruited thousands of volunteers, including those from ethnic minority backgrounds.
What I didn't want, personally as well, is to have the vaccine later on when it is rolled out, and at that time it was fingers crossed rolled out, that it wasn't tested on people like me.
You had to fast track the process while making sure it was safe. How did you do that?
Asking a company, if that takes 3 months, what do we need to do to get it down to 2 months? What do we need to do? If you can, that takes normally 1 week. How can we do it in 1 day? Pressure testing the system, pushing people along. There was a lot of pushing.
After the most challenging of years, in December, Divya's father passed away.
My dad said to me when I sort of left India, be a good human being, do good things, and make sure you meet the Queen. Difficult time, but also I now feel that he would be extremely proud.
Divya is one of many who's played their part in the ongoing fight against COVID. With cases once again on the rise, it's hoped this time the vaccination programme, which has received royal recognition, will shield us in a way that wasn't possible before. Anna Collinson, BBC News.
And that's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Good night.